Thank you, Jim, for what you do. Really appreciate it. So I appreciate fully where Stephen's review of JP Morgan and Jimmy Dimon's look at the marketplace. So I'm going to give you a perspective maybe a little different, because we're not JP Morgan, we're not Wall Street. We are in the trenches fighting, and we're fighting in a couple of different spots. And it's important for us in the life sciences ecosystem to understand. There's things that are happening at the macro level, the macroeconomic level, a global level, and then certainly inside of that space. And I think everybody here who's in the life sciences really understands it. I'm going to mention some things that some of our best companies are impacting right now. And so if we really want to make a difference, this ecosystem has to excel. And not just excel on a little bit, it has to excel on a lot of it. And that is really finding the investors, it's finding the startup companies, it's finding the entrepreneurs that can come together to make a difference. And I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Next slide. Oh, I'm going to go over here and get them. Yeah, so there's three things I want to talk about. One is, this is at the macro level. We have a significant problem in global health equity. We have health deserts in this country right now. What does that mean? That means we don't have access, we don't have clinicians, we don't have the ability for telemedicine, we don't have infrastructure. This is a significant problem, not just in the United States, but around the world. So I've had the ability to travel the United States, both in and out of uniform, and globally to see the difference between health primary and health desert. And I'll tell you, the deserts are bad. And in our own country right now, we have folks who can't get to medicine, can't get to any type of clinician. Telemedicine will help, but there's not an internet infrastructure significant enough to support the bandwidth to allow these devices to work. If we don't really think through this problem set, we're going to be expanding that. And let me talk to what the health desert looks like. So those that are in the health desert are 1/20th of the total spend to get monitoring. So those on the higher socioeconomic level and those in urban areas, we are over-monitored, we're over-assessed, and we're over-tested. Why? Because we have access and we have liquidity. That does not occur on the other side. And if we don't close that gap very, very quickly, that continues to grow. And it grows in terms of really the macroeconomic and microeconomic situation in terms of what a desert looks like. There's food deserts, there's health deserts. We've really got to close that gap. If we can close the gap in the United States, we can demonstrate around the world the way to do this. That's another means for us to really kind of be impactful from the United States. From an economic perspective, if we sneeze, the rest of the world catches a cold. So think about it from a healthcare perspective as well. So health equity, that's important. The next one is really where I come from, near ubiquitous sensing. So right now, everybody's phone that's watching is sensing something. There is a classic difference between sensing and monitoring. Monitoring is you are looking for something very, very specific. In a sensing mode, you are looking at a global sensing capability that's going to be ubiquitous. And it's near ubiquitous now. So if you look at your phone, your bedroom, your house, your Alexa, your Siri, everywhere is sensing. If you don't think it's sensing, talk about something that you want to buy and see what pops up on your social media feed. I mean, that's the classic example. But in the healthcare space, it is going to be expanded. And so there's significant conversation about healthcare. If you were flat last year, you were a win. But really what it looks like is the folks that can think creatively, that can use technology to their advantage, can use existing use models and case studies to allow that ubiquitous sensing to occur, allowing the customer, the consumer, to have their actual value add so they can use their information the way they want to use it, protect that information. Now you have the ability to extend that healthcare model into places that were not existing. That's a fundamental difference. If you think about it, there are a lot of wearable devices out there, but they're often siloed. And if you really want to think truly holistically, you connect those sensing devices. So it's a sensing capability that says, okay, there's indicators or there's critical hierarchy or there's hurdles that I'm just sensing, but if I detect a problem and I can correlate that to my basic biometric data, now I can make a decision. If you think about artificial intelligence, and Stephen said it right, I mean, one thing of AI inside the healthcare space, you must have a human in the loop, right? The hallucinations of the existing models, both machine learning and AI, require the human to be in the loop. It could either be the consumer or a clinician, but somebody has to make a decision. With these sensing models, now you have the ability to have, what I'm getting to the next one, is your personalized healthcare. So again, the genomic therapy, proteomics, genomics, right, that science is quickly going to move with big data to a fact where you're going to actually be sensing, be monitoring on certain devices, and then have critical care delivered to you on a number of different levels. So there are people working with drones. When I say cobble together existing technologies, there are people working with drone technology to deliver medications to the health deserts. That's pretty amazing. Now, if we think about that model, go upstream, if you look at the personalized medicine, now you are developing a therapy or an assay in a lab, in a manufacturing facility. It can get to you, you can see the response back through the ubiquitous sensing. You can actually see where that medication, that process, that assay is working, yes or no. And in the NEREAM model, we're going to add a neurodata stack to all this. So now you can do basic biometric data, complemented with a neurodata, which is a fingerprint to you. It's a leading indicator. Now you have the opportunity to be really, really thoughtful and impactful in terms of where you go in this model over here. So I'll stop right there. I could go on for hours and hours, but I think these three things are interrelated. But certainly if we don't think through the problem set, we're not going to get to a solution where we can have global health equity to the point where it's a personalized medicine. I'll give you one example. So for the last couple of years in America, there's been a lot of consternation about vaccines for babies and then the higher level of autism perhaps. So what did we do in the United States? We let this ecosystem build with lack of information and data. Finally, somebody in the UN went to Denmark who studies everybody in their country. They have all the personalized healthcare data. They looked at it for 40 years and said, no, there's no leading indicator that says vaccines have a higher response rate in autism. It took them 3 hours to run the math. It took us 4 years in terms of ecosystem to try to talk through it. That's the power of information. The flip side of that is misuse of information. So if you are near ubiquitous sensing and you have personalized medicine, you must protect that data to allow those humans in the loop to make those decisions. If not, it can be used in very kind of difficult areas. So I'll stop right there. Yeah.
Spend 1 minute, then explain your product for NEREAM, please.
So NEREAM is a neurodata science company enabled by smart sensing fabrics. So EEG is the classic gold standard for measuring brainwave data. We're going to use smart novel sensing materials to take it off of a cap or something on your forehead in a normal use model like a pillowcase, a compression wear t-shirt, and the wristband material around your Fitbit, Whoop, and Garmin to be able to collect your neurodata, protect it, curate it, and then use that neurodata stack to develop improved outcomes. The outcomes are anything from start of life to end of life. Our first modality is going to be in sleep. So you'll essentially be able to run your own sleep study each night and then watch your brain's response to you and our predictive capability to improve your sleep. Your sleep is an indicator of your performance in the next couple of days or so. So that's the way this is going to model. So we fit squarely in all of this. And because our design, and I'll go public with it right now, our prototype last night actually demonstrated, this is our first prototype, demonstrated that we are collecting not only brainwaves, we're collecting the brainwaves in sleep that allow us to do this ubiquitous sensing. So unbelievable. Yeah. Thank you. But this is the power of data. And again, if you use the data correctly, the outcome is amazing. If you misuse the data or don't have that human in the loop, that data can be very, very problematic. If we can do this right, we can reduce the health deserts. We can do that for the United States. We can use it as a link spot around the country as well. Thank you very much.
My name is Chris Lamb. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Device Solutions. Thank you, Jim, for setting all this up and this opportunity. Just a brief blurb about us. We're an embedded services company. We design devices. We're a 40-person team. We've been doing this for 20 years. And before that, we worked in a wide variety of consumer products, primarily cellular phones and Iridium satellite devices. We like to joke that we think inside the box. So we don't design mechanics. We don't do cloud, we don't do mobile app. We design the electronics and the firmware on the inside to help devices like NEREAM's device collect the data, communicate it to the cloud where it can be analyzed and acted upon. So I didn't go anywhere as inspiring as JP Morgan's meeting. I went to CES, fought the crowd, sat in traffic, ate bad food, but you know, there's...
Explain what CES is.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Vegas, right?
CES is in Vegas. It's about a 200,000 person show. It's Consumer Electronics Show is what it stands for. And I think that anybody who's inventing or developing a new device, consumer or business facing, probably should go make sure it hasn't already been invented, because it's just mind-boggling. It's the whole Las Vegas Convention Center, which is basically 4 halls. It's the Sands, which is at least 2 floors. And basically every major hotel has hundreds of suites. So you spend at least half your time in a taxi or a shuttle bus, or walking because it's just too slow. You can usually walk 3/4 of a mile faster than the taxi. So you might as well just do it. Everybody expected CES to be all about AI, and of course it was. Generate a dog for your backpack, or whatever you wanted. There it was everywhere. Of course, I expected a little bit more. There we go. That maybe they just renamed the whole show Consumer AI Show, because it was literally everywhere, as you'll see in the next couple of slides. A little closer? Okay. Always hard to tell. So I was asked by Jim about 4 weeks ago. He says, hey, could you talk about digital health? And I said, I don't know, I'm a device geek. I don't really know all this digital health stuff, but what do you need? He said, devices. And I'm not exaggerating. I don't think the mail was much longer than that. So I said, sure. And then I didn't hear from him, and I asked somebody to hey, post, I'm going to this event. And she was all excited because I was on the speaker's agenda, which was when I realized that I'd been drafted to speak at this. And then 2 weeks ago, I was walking around at CES, had a little bit of break. Jim timed it just right and said, hey, could you summarize CES for us and digital health? I'm like, Jim, this is sort of like summarizing the encyclopedia. There's a little bit of everything. And so I'll try to give you guys a flavor of this. If you haven't been, it's really overwhelming. Everybody is there. All the large consumer electronics companies are there. Just to give you an idea of the scale, Sony has a big booth with all their products, their prototype car, and probably a 50-foot long wall with multiple scenes like a sitcom setup, and 50 broadcast-grade cameras set up along there so the people can test out the different cameras. And that's just one part of the Sony booth. So it's a pretty amazing event. You can't really summarize it. I'm always amazed when I see the 10 best things at CES articles. How did I miss 8 of them? Even though I basically just walk the show, take a note, take a picture, take a bad picture. All it has to do is remind me to look these guys up or to share it with somebody like Rob when I get there. But it's just amazing amount of stuff. So CES is always a little over the top. It is in Vegas. I don't know who needs a massage chair that's bright yellow and designed by Pininfarina. Maybe if you have an antique Jaguar, that's a key selling point to this massage chair, but I also don't know what decor that would fit in. The other thing I learned is that if I could get a pedal-powered desk for everybody, or at least a treadmill, all my ESG problems go away, and my team's lifespan is going to go up. So I will have a turbocharged well-being, ESG solved, and if that doesn't work, then I need an AI chair. So these are the things you can count on finding in the main part of the hall, and the deeper you go, you'll find the little 10x10 booths with even crazier stuff or bejeweled phone cases and things. Moving on to be a little more serious. So these are some of the things before we really dig into the other healthcare. There were quite a few food scanners. I didn't stop and look a lot, but there was definitely a trend on food that I hadn't noticed before. Light treatments and therapies continue to be exciting. We've seen these over the years. They've come and gone, but there were quite a few booths here. I think this smart sound AI sounds interesting. They're going to listen to all the sounds of your body and diagnose your diseases. So if only it was that simple. Slightly different, I think this is an interesting UI device. This is a wristband, and they can use it like a mouse. So he's pinching his fingers together and raising and lowering the different objects, and much more interactive without having to get out your phone and swipe. And I know that this is coming to several other devices in the future. Am I standing in the wrong place? There we go. So brain sensing already came up. These things seem to come in waves. We have several customers with brain sensing projects right now, and there was quite a few of them. We have a Samsung product or Samsung-sponsored startup doing earbuds with EEGs, or a Circle Limited. I'm not sure what they're doing, but another brain patch. These guys are bringing brain sensing. You can't see. I needed a way to make these really big, but it would have been too many slides. This guy's wearing an EEG cap and running a driving simulator, but they're bringing some sort of they're tapping into the brain for automotive innovation. So whether they're detecting that you're sleeping or not, or collecting data to do that, not really clear from that. Another just sort of general EEG and a breathing coach. So yet one more thing to carry around in charge, but maybe you can be mindful about that when you do. Quite a few of these. Sleep, again, this came up today. Quite a big number of those there. What impressed me not just was the number of them, but the size of these booths. So this eco-sportive or Dawn House booth, you can kind of see, here's the person. So these are big, like 40 by 40 booths or bigger, really all out on the sleep. All about how sleep helps with recovery, mental health, everything else. This is sort of, they're looking for resellers. We've got babies, we've got dream socks to monitor your baby. So all kinds of sleep activities. And you know, these Sarah Gym people, they went all out. That's an expensive booth, all about sleep on one of the main halls. This isn't in the back alley or something. So sleep got a lot of attention and sort of aligns with what we see here. Age tech has always been a big thing. There's always been a lot of people with smart canes trying to do gait analysis and things like that. There are a few people here, the French in Eureka Village, which is sort of the most interesting place to go in the basement of the Sands. It's all 10 by 15 booths with startups. And different countries have big sections. So they have a 15-second gait analysis for elderly to detect falls. That's a pretty common kind of application. What we saw here is a company I did not expect to find at CES. AARP had an enormous booth. And everybody was a little surprised by that. It's nearly 100 feet long. And inside they had lots of little startups. One of them was like a hologram, so you could have a 3D video phone call, nearly life-size. Looked pretty realistic, seemed pretty cool. The only problem was it also seemed to be in a vertical bathtub. So it was a little, maybe they need to refine the presentation there a little. These Futronics guys, they have a lot of elderly robotics, smart assist robotics. So maybe they deliver or act as companions, but they also have like a smart wheelchair and walkers, which I think will make a lot of sense as providing some intelligent resistance and perhaps allowing people to be a little more mobile without quite so much human support, which is needed because finding people to provide that human support is hard. Devices. So I think there's a real trend that the devices are starting to become more and more useful. I have a friend who has an Oura Ring. He woke up one morning and said, you slept poorly, your heart rate is variable, and your temperature's high. And he took a COVID test, and sure enough, he had it. So we're starting to see that the battery life and the number of features and the quality of features, whether it's the EEG on the watches or whatever, are starting to become more and more useful and a little less gimmicky. Withings almost always has a big booth with some nice stuff. They had this 4 sensor device that measures, your body temperature. It's a digital stethoscope, blood oxygenation, and also they call it a medical grade ECG. I don't know if it's really medical grade with just 2 fingers, but you can see that this would be good. You could record your lungs for your kids, send it to the doctor, get temperature, which you already have. I can see that this device would be the next evolution of the digital thermometer that you already have at home. Rings continued to be popular, so there's the little Ring-Con. There's the X-Ring, which of course got Health GPT into it, and there's the Zerker Ring, which even helps you with your daily prayers. So a little bit of everything. Hemodialysis is coming, more and more portable, more and more simple. That's a good thing. One of the things I thought was really interesting was this CoDX. So this is PCR testing at home. It's a small countertop box, like the size of a toaster. So with all the global health things, maybe it's not in the home, but it's in every bar and every event, so you can do a test quickly or something like that. And then another wearable wristband, but again, getting more useful data, more blood pressure and useful parametrics, not just very simple stuff like we used to get. And scanning and biometrics continues to be interesting. Ultra-wideband, also called radar, is becoming more and more practical. It's a North Carolina technology. We've got a lot of it coming out of Corvo. And they can do things like detecting your heartbeat from a mirror, from a distance. The home automation guys are using it to help you with speaker placement. But it's becoming something with the elderly and infant, with the IU+. We have another radar bus from the C1 guys, radar sensing from the C1 guys. What looks like a handheld home ultrasound device. Seems like that could be complicated to get a lot of use of, but The technology certainly seems to be there. The body log guys do posture and some vital signs to magically do some more diagnostics. And I always like the claim here on the neurologics. It can measure 100 health parameters in just 30 seconds. So that seems pretty miraculous. And of course, there's always a lot of, let's say, health and fitness. So the in-body people are doing a lot of body composition analysis, BMI, things like that. So you'll find a lot of those at CES. A couple other not necessarily health related directly, but we'll see that they tie into it, I think, and make the devices more practical. Ambient Photonics is one of the companies that are making these indoor solar panels. So you can use them on your devices and you don't need so many batteries. So here's a typical kind of TV, smart TV device, and you can see the solar panels just that small square there. And now they don't need batteries, or the batteries at least self-recharge for a very long time. And that's going to be more and more ubiquitous, maybe even in your light switches, have energy harvesting light or otherwise. We see that there's a standard called Matter for interoperability of smart home devices. This allows interoperability between Google, Amazon, and Apple, among others, but they've all agreed to kind of play nicely on both Wi-Fi and some other protocols. Aqua's finally come up with a gateway. This has been one of the missing pieces that's sort of third party other than those big three. And they have a very wide range of devices that are available now. So you can really start building out a system. You're not quite so captive to any one system. And these border routers are necessary. So Aqua has one, and people like MediaTek, the chipset company, we're starting to talk more and more about their reference designs, where in the past when I've been saying, okay, I can build a device, but nobody has a router, nobody had one. Now those reference designs are available. Coming back to the whole craziness of CES, it's an electronics show. Let me show you a toilet. So Kohler had an enormous, beautiful booth full of toilets, infinity tubs, shower heads, all kinds of things. But they, again, went all out, and the latest tech was all there. As I said, I often notice things based on my customers or the people I'm talking to. I have a kid and a half who, one kid who's a vet and one who wants to be, more or less. So I noticed the pet stuff, and I really thought maybe it was my attention, but it seemed like there was a lot more veterinary applications. And again, like the other medical devices, they're getting more sophisticated, more complete. It's not just a dog tracker or a bark detector or something like that. We have analysis systems where they're getting AI insights from something. They have smart doors. They're calling it a whole pet hospital, integrated health system. So they're starting to really do a lot more pet-based healthcare. So I think that was it. So here's a slide you can read later, all about the kinds of things we do inside the box. We've done all kinds of projects on all kinds of processors and radios, wearable, industrial, commercial, medical, military, a little bit of everything. So thank you everybody for coming out and the chance to talk, and I hope you get to go to CES.
So good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm just really excited to be here in Wilmington. It's a great place. My daughter just graduated from UNCW, so I'm a big fan. Sadly, she's not in the life sciences, though. She's now in Charlotte working for Wells Fargo. But banking, it's always good. We need bankers. So I'm Laura Gunter, president of NC Life Sci. We were known until this fall as NC Bio, or the North Carolina Biosciences Organization. So we are the trade association for the life sciences here in North Carolina. We've been around, this is our 30th year, and we came into existence about 10 years after the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. And is Randall here? No, okay. But the center, as some of you probably know from knowing Randall Johnson, is an economic development agency, and they're really funded primarily by the state. And so as the industry grew, there was a group that got together and said, we need a voice. And that's really where we came in, and when NC Bio, now NC Life Sci, was formed. So we are that voice. So we talk to state legislators, we talk to some local folks, we talk to our federal legislators, the North Carolina delegation, and we talk about what North Carolina needs to look like, what kind of policies need to be in place so that you all as innovators and employers can be successful. So that's really what it is that we do in a nutshell. There we go. And so I just wanted to sort of put that out there because we do have companies from across the state, and we're happy to talk individually, and we do a lot of connecting, so a lot of networking events. And so we're really happy to be here with Jim and kind of take advantage of meeting all of you. We have a savings program through National Bio, and that really allows small entrepreneurial companies to have access to the pricing and savings of a large pharmaceutical company. In fact, our laboratory company that we work with, VWR now, Avantor, their contract with Bio and all of the state affiliates like NC LifeSci across the country, it is their largest contract. So it's bigger than any individual pharma company that they might do business with. And so you can see that it's very valuable to them. So you are right up there in terms of the pricing and the support that you get. So that's a great feature. And then finally, we know the legislative and the influence things that we do. So we help on a broad scale with companies, and then we also help individual companies. So I'll run through, just because I think, the other folks that have spoken are much more on that tech and company side. We're kind of that convener, that helper, part of the ecosystem. So I thought I would go over a couple of the places and why we care, because I know you all are out doing your day jobs, trying to advance your technologies, finding money, doing all of those day-to-day things, and you're like, I don't really care what's going on at the legislature. But there are some pieces that it is important to care about, and that's why we're here to care about them on your behalf. One of those, of course, is the Biotechnology Center. They have funding. They do the Bioneer Challenge. That was where that $40,000 that Jim mentioned earlier came from, and that came from the state. So if the state doesn't give money to the Biotech Center, those things aren't going to happen. So that is an important piece that we always support. We also support the One North Carolina Small Business Fund, and that is a program, and First Flight is here, and Krista and Emil are here, and of course the FAST program, and I think some of you have maybe participated in that, and there was an award, OpiAID. Did you all are on the SBIR, I think, support list. So when a company is successful in getting an SBIR grant or an STTR if they're working with a university, the state has matching funds. Now, not enough, and so that's one of the things we're working on to try to increase that number, but that's something that we talk about to the legislature all the time. It's like, look, your companies can go to the federal government, they can get non-dilutive funding, keeps all the value here in North Carolina, and then you're giving them some money that allows them then to protect their intellectual property, do a market research study, something that's not nearly as restricted as the federal government, but still on the grant side. So we're working very hard with our legislators to show success stories so that they understand the value of this program. We finally got what we call recurring dollars. That means that it's in the budget every year. We don't have to fight just to get it recognized. It's run for the Office of Science, Technology, and Innovation that sits in the Department of Commerce, and it is really, I think, an amazing program. So it goes, right there, ties right in with what's going on at First Flight in that FAST program. The technology work that, the Bioneer program. If you're applying to the Biotech Center and looking at early stage seed funding, you should also be doing a concurrent application to an SBIR agency. There's a lot of opportunity, again, for that non-dilutive funding to prove the technology. They also do grant preparation support, so there's sort of a twofold piece of that grant. We work on things like franchise tax. The franchise tax in North Carolina taxes, all sort of small companies and everybody. And of course, large companies, they can pay a franchise tax. They can adjust their sales a little bit. They can do something to kind of know that they're going to have that tax. A small company that's pre-revenue, that just takes money out of their pockets that they're trying to spend, furthering their technology. So, we're working really hard, again, at the legislature to, one, get rid of the franchise tax altogether, which I think they'd like to do, or at least to step it down, to take care of our small, innovative companies that are so important. And they understand that small businesses actually make up the vast majority of employers in the state. And lastly, we get involved in things like potential regulations around various environmental issues like PFAS, which of course is big here, and you've heard a lot about it. But there's unintended consequences of that. If a company has PFAS it's in like the plastic wiring that may be on your piping in a bigger manufacturing facility, but all of a sudden you've got PFAS in your facility, and it's not part of your operations, it's not part of your processes, and yet you may have some environmental issues to go along with that. So we work on a lot of those things as well, and then we work on, from year to year, just individual access issues around Department of Health and Human Services, and so basically if you have an issue that you think that the state might be able to work on, we're happy to take a look and see where that falls and what we can do. We also get involved in on the federal tax side, and right now, if anybody's interested, there's a bio action or a call to action right now for that R&D tax amortization. So that is something that the federal government voted in 2017, but it didn't actually hit the books until 2022, and it's basically says that your R&D expenditures that you've been putting as an expense, next to your revenue line, and revenue can be grant money coming in, by the way, or dollars that you're getting from other sources, partnership dollars, et cetera. All of a sudden, instead of being able to expense those R&D expenses that first year, you have to amortize them over 5 years. Well, that completely changes your tax liability. And so it's a huge hit, or potentially a huge hit to companies if you're not aware of it. And if you're using grant dollars, you can't use grant dollars to pay taxes. Plus, you've already spent it because you've already done the R&D. So that is something that we're trying to get a fix for, and it's in the latest tax package that they're arguing about right now. So if anybody is on our mailing list, you've probably seen that call to action, but if you're not and you want to see that and send something to your legislator, let us know and we can make sure that you get that, because that's, I think, really critical right now. Intellectual property, obviously you all know that's your lifeblood. I mean, that's what you have, that's what you're banking on, that's what you're selling when you're going to a venture conference, because it's that intellectual property that's protected that allows you to have a better technology than somebody else, and allows you to then ultimately get to the market and sell your product. And so if the government can march in and take that away because there's been some piece of your technology that comes from some governmental dollars, university tech transfer, maybe it started with some NIH funding, that's huge. That totally changes what can happen in terms of that conversation with that venture capitalist. They said, well, do you have money from the federal government in your product? It can be a really small amount, but all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't know that I want to invest in your company because the government could march in and take it away and decide that they should sell it at a lower price point, for instance. So that's another big piece. So we're, again, spend a lot of time talking about intellectual property. Price controls, medical device, access to breakthrough technologies. There's a whole host of things we work on the federal side. So just kind of, this is just like an awareness thing. But certainly from a immediacy, the R&D tax amortization is a huge issue and would love to get support. And then to kind of come back and talk about AI and machine learning in the life sciences. We've had a little discussion around that this evening already. The White House and Biden put out an executive order on AI recently, and there's been also several requests for information in the, on the legislative branch. And did you go to a second slide for my other 8 pillars? I had 8 pillars, and there's only 4. Miranda, do you know? Okay. Anyway, there were 8 pillars. These are 4 of them. The other 4 look like they've disappeared from the slide. Maybe they're on the next. No. Okay. Well, anyway, basically, if you think about it, what we've seen here is the life sciences are already involved in AI, as you know. I mean, from data collection to the chat GBT and using those. And of course, we're a very regulated, as Stephen said, industry. So much of what these pillars get at are things that we're already doing in the industry, and they're going to continue to be regulated. And obviously, HIPAA compliance and those things, safety, security, all of that is kind of built in. So I'm not sure there was anything, really out of the realm of, expectation when we looked at these pillars that the EO suggested. Yeah, thanks. But I was just going to say the other ones are, in addition to those on the screen, sorry. No, that's all right. Standards, so promoting innovation and competition, governance and oversight, international cooperation, and public engagement and trust. So no real surprises, I don't think there. So I just wanted to sort of throw those out as things we're looking at. From an AI perspective, as I say, we're all doing it, and I think I did hear a conversation a couple weeks ago. Workforce is a big issue, and yeah, that's up there. And I think people are like, "Oh, is AI going to replace us?" Not anytime soon. And when we use the tools of AI, like Stephen was saying, you use it, you get some information, and then you have to still have that human interaction with it. A recent example was. A consultant in the ophthalmology space had somebody, a small company, come to her and say, "Hey, I've put together, my intro slide or my executive summary," and she read it and she said, "Well, where did you get some of this information?" She goes, "Well, I did chat GBT," and she's like, "Well, some of this just isn't true." So we have to remember, where is chat GBT going to get their information? I mean, sort of garbage in, garbage out. It's a classic. So it's going to need that human element as well. It's going to need someone to really evaluate the data that's being collected. And I think all of that is kind of here in that executive order in terms of some of that governance, oversight, and monitoring. So with that, I will stop, although I will add one thing or two things. In addition to the CED conference that's coming up in March, the 20th that week, there's also a conference, a RESI conference. So RESI, some of you may know the RESI conferences. They've often been, like there was one in JP Morgan recently in San Francisco. There was one around at Bio in Boston last year. We, NC, along with our sort of sister organizations across the Southeast, have gotten together and asked RESI to come and do a RESI Southeast. So that will be happening March 25th with an in-person event in Atlanta and then a 2-day virtual conference. And so that opportunity is available to companies in the Southeast. So again, if you're interested in that, you can contact me, you can contact Jim. I'll make sure he has the information on how to get engaged in that. But another place that you can go and pitch. And they bring a lot of investors. And so that was really the plug and the reason we wanted to bring RESI to the Southeast. So with that, turn it back to Stephen.
It was going to be successful. We had a very choppy 2023. We were cautiously optimistic about 2024, and I'd like to see if you guys have any perspective on that that balance between hardcore regulated medical solutions that have clinical significance that have been proven in a clinical trial versus things that are just kind of cool and that are very consumer oriented. Who wants to take a shot at that first?
This is on, yeah. Well, interestingly, of course, your cell and gene therapy piece, that I think is going to continue to be really strong because that is really looking at usually genetic diseases and things that we really potentially can now cure. I think when you're talking about the lifestyle, and interestingly, of course, some of the obesity and insulin and related drugs, they're going to be really high because everybody wants to sort of be well. But I think really that the wearables, both from a sort of monitoring, being more aware, I think that's gonna explode because it's not gonna be regulated, and you're gonna be able to get to market pretty quickly. And I think that there's gonna be a lot of money put into those spaces. So it'll be interesting, because I think at some point there's gonna be that convergence, right? That we're gonna use that, that's gonna send us to the doctor, and we're gonna demand that then the drugs and the cures are there as well. So it's really gonna be an interesting balance, I think, moving forward, because we're gonna know a lot more when we go into the doctor. We're gonna have all this data. We're not gonna wait for them to do tests, because I feel a little weird. We're gonna have some actual sort of data to show.
I think that there will be a lot of investment in the consumer space. It'll kind of start there, and we saw that with the watch. And I can tell a story from the 2000s when we were doing 2G cellular. We barely had any data on our phone. 9600 baud. Why would I want a game on my phone? We started doing cameras. People are like, why do I want a camera on my phone? And all the hype and everything around the mobile internet. Then there was the .com crash, and everybody sort of forgot about that. But it continued to evolve, and 2010 on, everybody took it for granted. Anybody want to go back to 2G? No. Nobody knew they needed 4G. Nobody knows they need 5G. It's going to continue to evolve and become essential. And we've seen the same kind of thing with the healthcare in the watches and things like that, right? At first it was a little gimmicky, and now they're really good ECGs, and they're taking a lot of data, and they're collecting, and they're diagnosing, and it'll start there and it'll evolve. We even had a customer today who for 10 years has been working with us building a custom cellular gateway for his medical device, and finally they're acknowledging that the enterprise phones that they can give out with their Bluetooth dongles are good enough, and they're sort of backing off some of their custom products. So it'll continue to be wellness and health oriented for as long as it can, and then transition, as we see, into real medical products. And sort of you see that even with the Withings product I had up there, where it was moving away from a gimmick and more to something that you can put on the shelf and use every day.
Yeah, so Chris hit it on the head. We're going to see some vertical integration in companies that aren't necessarily data science companies like pharma, that are working down into different areas, because data is really, as we talked about, one of the key things for them to make almost any decision in the life science industry. I think, right, good enough is good enough. The FDA just gave Apple Watch in the last 2 years an AFib certification and epilepsy certification. So now you are correlating personal data, basic biometric data, saying there's enough correlation that you have something wrong. That is a strong move from the FDA to put their toe in the water to say, okay, now I don't need you to come in to the hospital, to emergency room, to a cardiologist to say you've got a problem. That good enough data is good enough, and as that data gets stronger, as the machine learning and the AI behind it become more robust, the correlation becomes more individualized. And that's what I was talking about in the personal medicine out there in healthcare, is you will be not only be able to compare yourself against the general demographic and general population, you'll be able to, through blockchain healthcare, compare yourself to changes, disturbances, modifications in your biometric and neuro data. That becomes very strong. And that's the human in the loop. You will be now identified, hey, there's a problem, you need to take action, Chris, or Rob the cardiologist gets that information, and Rob the cardiologist makes a decision. I think there's going to be tremendous investment continued inside of healthcare. I think Mr. Diamond was spot on. It was choppy last year. I think people are coming out of 23 or looking into 24 to see where the investments were in a very difficult environment in 23. And I think 24 has cautious optimism. But I think the investment dollars are going to go to those who are winning. And I mentioned earlier, those who are winning are the ones that are the most creative, innovative, able to take modern technologies, cobble them together in different use cases, and provide the decision support to those in need. It also goes to the kind of health deserts that are out there, because now you can use this information at distance. So it's telemedicine at the edge. It's individualized and personalized, and you can combine it with not only efficacy of process and solution, but now you're looking at response back, that the individual is able to talk to that doctor in a near immediate response.
Yeah, so one of the trends that I saw, you guys know Humira. So Humira used to be the world's #1 kind of selling drug. There's now like over 10 biosimilars that now compete with Humira. Not a single biosimilar has any digital health aspect to their auto-injector. They're not collecting any digital data. Do you know why? That little piece of digital hardware that's on the system that may communicate to your iPhone, it costs money. And everyone is choosing to be cheap and not understanding that data is really going to unlock all this crazy value. So in oncology or cancer, they say tissue is the issue. If you can get a sample of your tumor, you have a very high chance of curing your disease. I think if you have data, you have the ability to leverage all this amazing power and develop algorithms you couldn't even conceive, as well as interweaving all this other information coming from other wearables and other aspects of your life. But I'll just tell you right now, the reason like Biogen shuttered their digital health program is they can't justify the incremental cost collecting the data because they don't have the imagination of how powerful that data is. And I really would love to see that problem fixed and for people to really believe in the data. And what I noticed is these amazing entrepreneurs are saying like, we're gonna do it anyway. We have to have the data. Without the data, we don't have a future as a company. All right, switching topics. Something that, let's fast forward to, let's pick a date, 2030. So 2030, we mentioned that CAGR, compound annual growth rate. Life science is growing at an enormous rate. It's a great area to invest in. What is the thing that you're most scared of in 2030? And then what is the thing that you're most optimistic about or most hopeful about the year 2030? So let's really advance to the future there.
So I'll take that. So I think most of us know Moore's Law. It's right, the curve that shows kind of improvements over time. I think Moore's Law in the healthcare space is going to accelerate in the next couple of years. I think the use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, I think the data science and analytics behind it are going to put healthcare in a completely different spot, which allows us to get across the country, get across verticals, get across modalities. That's going to be, I think, the big thing. The thing that concerns me at 2030 is the absolute efficacy of data in the marketplace and the potential misuse for data. Because if you misuse biometric data, it's one thing. If you misuse things like neurodata and brainwave data, you can use that to turn around and do some really difficult things. And a lot of our geopolitical competitors are actually looking at that environment. So we have to, right, the second part of that is the regulations inside the United States need to be smart, right? Sometimes our elected officials can't spell AI. We're creating executive orders. As a almost 40-year employee of the government, I understand that fully. We don't want the Fab 7 CEOs determining how we use information as well. So that discourse and break in understanding and application of the way we use data going forward is very, very important. If we misuse the data, we break the trust and confidence in the consumer, and then all these models we talk about, the value of data, that becomes almost zero.
I'll take it from the device side, I guess. What you see has happened in the watch, the cell phone moving from under the seat of your car to your wristband. That scale of technology with Moore's Law is going to continue, and now you're going to have smart Band-Aids, and implantables are going to be pretty common, and a lot more data and integration with the body, as you see with the continuous glucose pumps and the wearables for insulin monitoring and everything. Those are going to continue to expand for many more diseases and cases, all the way into stem cells and things like that. So the integration and the ability to monitor and impact the body is going to be pretty tremendous. But as Rob said, the misuse of the data, and it may be just simple like how it affects your insurance rates. That's really going to be a prevalent and unavoidable consequence.
I guess what I would add to that in terms of, I think there's tremendous growth and opportunity, and for all of those reasons, I think to your point with the digital health piece and the incremental cost, because we also see through the IRA and others a real look to drive down costs at the drugstore. And we all want to pay less, and we all want to be able to afford our medications, both the current ones and whatever we may need in the future. And so I think those things are going to potentially kind of converge where, yes, we should be collecting more data, but with price pressures, we won't necessarily do that. So it'll be, I think, interesting to see how all of that will start to play out. So I think we'll be sort of forced to use that data, but it'll also be an interesting sort of slog to make sure that we can justify those things. And I think the consumer, probably what will happen is from the consumer end, is we are all wearing these things, and it will start to create that demand that I think we'll want lower prices, but we'll also want to have access to all of and we'll come in with more issues and we'll know more about ourselves. I think that'll be a big piece. I'm curious how that plays out.
That's where all of us in the life sciences will really need to think thoughtfully and be methodical in terms of how we think about data. Because right now in America, 12 million misdiagnoses per year. 30% of all radiologists' reads are wrong. Can data help that? Yes. That's where the data can head. It's not going to usurp those experts in the field. The human in the loop must stay there in terms of any artificial intelligence inside of healthcare. But the potential benefit of using data to our advantage is monumental. It outstrips, I think, almost any technology issue, because you can apply that data into use models that are really, really impactful to a number of different modalities and verticals across the series of this thing. Loosely defined as life sciences and healthcare, you throw in wellness and performance in there, now you've got just about everything that most people are concerned about on a day-to-day basis.
Great. So then the last question here. So I love the idea that Jim had, which is we're going to have the 4 fintech companies who've learned all these lessons, running and growing their businesses, being successful, and then sharing the non-fintech success, the keys to their success to this audience. So I want to give each of you an opportunity to share something that just transcends life science, just goes beyond a particular industry, and something that you've observed or advice that you would have, any wisdom that you would want to share to this audience, so that as they move forward through 2024, as they plan their future for 2030, to give them these words of wisdom.
Yeah, I'll start. So if you would, please raise your hand if you have worked with Noreen, you've talked to us, a potential partner up there, just put your hand up. Keep going, there's more. So if you look around the room, this is the network of networks that allows this organization called an ecosystem to work. That's where I would focus your attention. Take the calls, follow the emails up, understand, right, the creative opportunities between tech, data, and science, and apply it to new use models. That is what the power of this organization is. Jim is a leading indicator for that. He's a big guy who stands up, but it's everything that flows underneath that. The connections and networks that are here is what's going to really drive this ink spot in this town called Wilmington to stamp ourselves just like fintech. There's going to be a life sciences bubble that's going to come, and it's going to be pretty impactful, and everybody in the room is a part of it. Thank you very much.
I can second that on the network thing. In RTP, we had a lot of telecom companies at one time. Not so many, so much, but many spin-outs, at least 10 out of the Sony Ericsson people that I know, for example. And that's been a huge partnership, source of business, source of camaraderie, and things like that. And now building more and more network here. So that's been really important. I would say make sure you stay flexible and curious. I mean, that's going to be how we pivoted over the years to different business cases and models. We started off thinking we're going to help with carrier acceptance because there was a need for that, and nobody wanted to outsource it after the first month at least. So we ended up doing more and more device development in many different markets, eventually took on medical devices. We didn't know what we were doing per se, but we've done it for 10 or 15 years now. So stay flexible, stay curious, and think about building your culture, because before you know it, it'll be like 20 years, you'll be like, what happened? So that's my advice.
And and I think my advice is probably the same from where I sit. Collaboration is key. None of us can do this by ourselves. We need everybody in the room. You don't know where that next conversation will lead. I'm sure that Rob talked to one of you and met somebody else and met somebody else, and then that person, 20 people down the line were the ones that wrote the check. So you just have to get out there, go to events like this. When you're in the Research Triangle Park area, come to something we're doing. Go just make sure that you're getting yourself out there. I think it's really key. I think the flexibility and then the passion, and make sure that you're taking advantage of First Flight, and the Biotech Center has a great library, and there's just a lot of resources and people that have done it before. So reach out to our organization or others, and just get yourself networked. And I think this is an amazing showing, and so Jim, kudos to you. I 167 people in the room with guidelines.
Thank you very much for your insight, all four of you. Everyone spoke a lot about data. Right? Data is the foundation for everything that we're doing. No one's talking about that duty in the pool, right? That corrupt data, that data that isn't quality data, right? You're developing a pool for AI to be very effective. You have to develop that pool of data for you to judge or make a basis for your decision, right? How does the panel see that with current health policy, current organizational structures, as well as regulatory input, a way to ensure that that data pool is kept intact and have quality data so we can make these decisions going forward?
Yeah, so I think at Chimonox we work with data all the time, and the FDA actually has something called computer system validation. They have a code of federal regulations called Part 11, and it's electronic signatures and data integrity for electronic data. And there's all these principles that you have to have. So you have to have you have to be able to recover your data. You have to be able to know that you manipulated data that you've collected. So you obviously should prevent that, but if data is changed, you have an audit trail on that data. So I think there's already kind of an ecosystem and a framework to follow on that. I think it's imperative. I notice I wear 2 different wearables right now. I got the Whoop and the iWatch Ultra 2, which is, again, the band one. And I'm still learning this thing. And I'm not sure I like it. It does too many things. But sometimes it gives me bad heart rate data. And I'm an older guy, and I like to exercise, I like to get up into zone 5, and it's giving me bad data. And I'm like, am I gonna make a bad decision based on bad data? And I don't want to. So it's just giving me the data it knows. And apparently if you want heart rate data, the only reliable heart rate data is a chest strap. And they know that. So this is just an estimate of your heart rate. It is not your heart rate. So I think we have to be very careful, and this is why I think the FDA-regulated side of digital health is going to move as an evolution, not a revolution, for the exact reason you said. And then other than following the framework that we already have, I don't have anything else to add here unless...
So that's a great question, right? We talked about hallucinations, we talked about some of the issues, right? There are guardrails from a regulatory and a process perspective, but that's why human in the loop must stay inside of healthcare and the AI. Any big science that has an application to human must have that. So you can look at your watch and say, my heart rate is not 174. But if it is 174, you want to go do something about it. So there's going to be, so we have HL7, HIPAA United States, GDPR in the Europe is far more advanced in terms of how they're going to protect it. That's going to become the global standard, and that's just the starting point. So I talked about blockchain level healthcare, right? So you have access to your data, it builds over time. Then you can say that's my data, and I'm not comparing it to a general population. It's my data, I use it the way I want it. That's where this has to go eventually. And then you get to the point where you get to the proteomics and genomics and gene cell therapy, where you can then custom design something and deliver it to your house, and you can watch the efficacy of that rather than going to a doctor's office. Because we know doctor's office visits today, they're on a timeline. They don't have your history and data. They can't look at it. They give you 20 minutes, maybe the first time you've seen that doctor, and now they're trying to diagnose you. That's what goes into the 12 million misdiagnoses. If we blockchain our healthcare data, provide the access to it, we have confidence in our data, I allow the right use levels in the right use cases, now we have the ability to make those more informed decisions. But you're spot on. If there's no trust in the data, there's no trust in the output of how we're using the data. So that's where our leading elected officials in terms of regulatory requirements and processes need to kind of leapfrog outside of what we did last week and look what we're trying to do in 2030, because that's where this has to get to. And then backwards plan ourselves into that from the device methodology, from the systems, again, from the infrastructure to get to the right kind of folks that can build these things. But if not, then this whole thing flops. And that's where some of the folks are just looking at an incremental cost. And digital health is a misused term. There's so many applications in digital health. This particular company, Biogen, who's a rock star on the genetic and biotech side, just didn't have the right aperture for, or appetite really, for digital health. But doesn't mean that their competitors would not kind of go up and down that vertical integration chain that I talked about. Does that help a little bit?
Okay, next question.
Okay.
Here's Emil.
Each one of you represents some leading indicators in our ecosystem. What are some of the things you need, one or two things that you need for your organization in the next 6 months? And then the flip side to that is, what would you like to add to the ecosystem in the next 6 to 12 months as a flip side of that?
Well, I'll sort of answer both questions because I think that there is an intersection for me. We're helping people collect the data. And we have somebody in the wellness space now who's collecting a lot of data, and they're going to have some automatic feedback. So they're going to create what they're calling programs, and it's going to improve things based on the data. They don't have any data now, and we're trying to make them understand you're going to have to collect a lot of data. You're going to have to tag it and label it and filter it and decide what's good and bad, and how many channels and which variables matter. There's a whole education that needs to happen there in order to say, I have an idea, I want AI to help me. What do I have to do to have the data to train it? It's one thing to do image recognition on a cat, because you can get a lot of images of cats, and you can tag them pretty easily. You can have somebody go through that. But if you're looking at a brainwave and you want to say whether they're meditating well or whatever, where's the data to train the AI? Tag for good, tag for bad, filtered and processed. So for me, I'm going to increasingly run into that problem. We're like, yeah, sure, I can measure that, I can monitor it, I can transmit Bluetooth to a phone, whatever. But I have to teach my customers how to be data smart. And the whole, it's a huge gap. People didn't have to grow up knowing how to train an AI, and now they do. And I think that's going to be one thing that we need end-to-end, both how to train our customers and how to bring more machine learning down into the very edge of the devices. So I would say those are the two things.
Oh, gosh. For me, where I sit with my sort of advocacy lens on, I guess, this is going to be a crazy year, election-wise. I mean, that's an understatement. So to keep focused on sort of working with the legislators that, are willing to listen, that are willing to understand, that are willing to actually do things in Washington that need to be done versus just being sound bites. So that's always, I think, a struggle for sure. So in an ideal world, we would have more folks that would actually be interested in legislating, in being collaborative. Again, we talk about being collaborative and getting things done. That's what we would like for our elected officials to do, to work together. So I think that would be kind of where I would like to see that. And I don't know that that's kind of a pipe dream, but we're going to spend some time. We as NC Life Sci added a federal lobbyist to our team this year, so we will be in DC a lot more and trying to really work and getting our delegation to work together, for good. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's a great question, Emil, and the way I've answered is creative industry, public, private, academic, investor partnerships. Not what we've done in the past, not individual silos, but bring together the people that lead these organizations, that are decision makers, that understand the science and technology, that understand where it's going, especially in the life sciences, because that's unique. Bring that together and really think thoughtfully about how to enact something. Not talk about it, try it, move on and pivot. Doesn't work, try it, move on and pivot again. But what we're doing is we are holding back the United States level of creativity and innovation, and we're being outstripped by our global competitors, i.e. read China. And if the Chinese get to the goal line on some of these critical technologies, we're going to be in a really difficult spot. So we can do that. We just need we need thought leaders, we need creative legislators, we need investors, we need entrepreneurs to come together. Somebody's got to really kind of host this and focus on it. That would knock it out of the park. That's not just a Wilmington ink spot, but it could start here. This is statewide. It should be state competing against states, but North Carolina is underrepresented in SBIR and CTR grants, so we have some opportunity within this thing called North Carolina. That would be a really fun environment.
I love this question. This is just like a wish list. So two things. First one is we got to restore funding to where the innovation is. So you guys are innovating the only people that can weather the storm right now are the big pharma companies, and they don't have innovation. Most innovation they have, they've done it through M&A. They've acquired small innovative companies. So we have to restore capital flow. It is a graveyard out there for some of these biotech and even digital related health companies. They have amazing IP, they have an amazing value proposition, they just do not have the capital to run their companies, and I'm really scared that once the capital's back, it may be too late. The other thing we need is for anything that's going to be a medical treatment that is prescribed by a doctor, that's reimbursed with the healthcare system, we need very clear regulations from the FDA when you have hybrid digital medicine and when you have AI helping with the clinical decision making. They need to get very, very clear on how they're going to regulate it and what exactly the rules are. They're kind of taking a hands-off approach. I think the executive order from Biden is a good start, but that should come from Congress. Like our lawmakers should tell us what the laws are going to be, not just from the president's desk, and we need to move fast on that.
Okay, last question of the night. Oh my goodness, Daniel Summers is gonna ask a question. Holy shit. Record this. Jack, you got it? All right.
No, pressure's on, I guess. Man. Well, thanks, Jim, and thank you guys. And look, I look up to every one of you on the stage, and I really appreciate you guys and your experience. So this one's a bit of more of a personal question. So, coming as a CEO myself, you just don't have enough hours in the day, right? So my question is around prioritization. What have you found either historically that you didn't do that now you're looking back on, in hindsight, and you're like, man, if I could have not wasted my time here or really only focused on X, Y, or Z, it really would have mattered and helped me get to the finish line or whatever first, or kept me from burning out. All the stuff around that keeps you leading well and not distracted. So it's kind of open-ended, I know.
Yeah, so I'll give you the open-ended question from Cooley's perspective. So it's find the critical path, and if you're not the one that should be doing it, partner now, right? Develop those partnerships up front, outsource what you can on a thoughtful commercialization pathway, but you don't have to do it all yourself, right? So I'm a geek too, but if he's a better geek, let me partner with him, and then let me get the next person from the data analytics perspective. The cobbling together at the CEO level. So you're a team manager and builder, you're a strategy developer and implementer, and you're a financing guy. If you can do those three things, everything else should be part of the organization. Now we're all struggling for finance in a very difficult raise environment, but the bottom line is know your critical path. You own that stuff that only you can do, and then I would outsource. And again, I asked everybody to raise their hands in the room that's helped Noreen. That's what we've done right now, is we've gone out and we said, here's our critical path, here's the expertise we're gonna keep inside, here's our partnership, right, stable, for lack of a better word, of who we're gonna bring onto the team. And these are not transactional partners. These are long-term strategic relationships that we wanna grow with. The other thing that I would offer is know when to pivot. If you look at any of the major companies out there, they all started off on a different design, a different strategy, a different go-to-market model. The best and most successful senior leadership are the ones that know when to pivot and pivot where. And that's only because you can focus on your critical path. And when you try things and fail fast and it doesn't work, have the intestinal fortitude to acknowledge that and move on to the next thing. And find the next set of partners that help you get to whatever the next step is. That's what I've seen in a couple of different opportunities.
Yeah, I don't think you can disagree with that at all. We started the business very different than a lot of people who have, vision to solve a particular problem. We were out of work. It was a dot-com crash. Things weren't very exciting. Jobs were crummy. Let's see what we can find. No big mission. Let's put our kids through college, which we've done now for 10 or 15 kids. So we didn't have this vision and organization behind it. But what we found all along is doing what you have to do. Focus on the things that you need to be doing. What can you delegate? What can you do? And it will always be hard. You'll never have enough people. You'll never have enough money. You'll always feel like you can do it better yourself. So how do you step away and say, I'm going to let this go. I'm going to delegate this. I'm going to find another way to do it. I'm just not going to do some things. Right? What are you not going to do today so that you can try to focus on the big things? And you'll never feel that you're very, very good at it. It'll be a constant struggle. So get used to it early.
Yeah, I mean, I come at it a little bit differently, I guess, since I'm not running a technology company, but I think, we're still a very small organization and so kind of small but mighty, but we rely heavily on and work closely with all of our partners, like Emma and Krista sitting here. So when somebody comes to us, it's like, okay, what piece can we do? Where can we send you for the rest of it? And that's really kind of how we work within the ecosystem. And I think back to the point about doing all that collaboration and getting all those people at the table, one of the things that North Carolina is pretty good at, and we can always improve, is getting a lot of people to the table. The ARPA-H process recently, and then there's a Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant that we worked on with the Biotech Center at the Hub and brought in a lot of different regional players from across the state. And we were successful in three areas. There were 7 original projects. But the fact that we went out and found those folks and brought them together and have sort of said, hey, we need to keep in contact. That's really key. And that's where, we'll start to have more success and be able to have those folks at the table, because now we can call them.
Yeah, the interesting thing about JP Morgan, it's the JP Morgan 42nd Annual Healthcare Conference, San Francisco. Nobody's talking about health. They're talking about deals, finance, M&A, technology. No one's talking about health. So Kymanox, we sponsored 4 different dinners. And you weren't gonna get your free dinner from Kymanox unless you went around the table and you shared a wellness routine that you felt like was a little bizarre, a little extreme, something that you found that you really love, that you do on a daily or weekly basis. And I think my advice to the audience is you have to take care of yourself. If you're the leader of the company, you have to take care of yourself. You need sleep, you need movement, you need great nutrition. You don't eat to, food isn't for feeling, it's for fuel. And so all that is like very hard to do. I mean, when I started Kymanox, I ballooned up to almost 280 pounds. And it's because I was eating very late at night. I was sleeping maybe 5 hours a night at most. And I really let my health go. And then I got it back. But man, if I had to give the advice, I said, maintain your health. And if you don't have it, make your health a priority. And we're saying life science. It's almost another word for healthcare. We don't want to be hypocrites. So we really have to focus on our health. The other advice I have is don't go it alone. If you can get a co-founder with you, if you can get an executive team and give them some equity, and really have some people at your side that have your back, that understand like the stress of payroll, and they're in your inner circle, and they're in there with you. And then don't go it alone with just the founder cash, just the founder investment. Get some other people's money in there. And I'll trade right now. I'll trade 100% of Kymanox for 1% of Apple, like all day long. I'll make that trade all day long. So you don't worry about having total control and then maintaining all that equity yourself. Like share that equity, get other people in there to help you. And I think finance is a time machine. It is really a time machine. So like I took no finance money. Kymanox could have been at least like where it's at today. That could have happened in probably 5 to 7 years, and instead it took me 20. Because we didn't really understand the power of finance until just recently.